Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here. Welcome back to Tesla Daily. Today we've got good news to talk about with Giga Berlin. We've also got updates on Giga Texas, Model Y vehicle identification numbers, news on the FSD Beta in Canada, some support of Ukraine by both SpaceX and Tesla, which is pretty cool to see, an update on 4680s from Panasonic, and a couple other items as well. Well, the volatility is kicking back in the other way in regards to the stock. A really strong day for Tesla today, up 7.5% to $870.43, while the Nasdaq was only up 0.4% today. The Dow and the S&P both slightly down. Obviously, we've got the Berlin news, which we'll talk about here in a second, but overall, this was just a strong day for renewable energy companies. The Invesco Solar ETF, that was also up 7.5% today. I think the market just showing some of the realization over the weekend, reflecting that today of what we had talked about on Friday about this war increasing the desire to accelerate individual countries' transition toward energy independence. I think we covered that well already, so I won't spend more time on that. And then again, just a reminder this week, in addition to everything else that we need to pay attention to, that Chairman Jerome Powell will be testifying for the Joint Economic Committee. That's on Wednesday, about 30 minutes after market open. All right, so let's talk about this Berlin news. Finally, we have an exciting update as it relates to Giga Berlin. Der Tagesspiegel reporting over the weekend that the final approval is to come at the end of this week for Giga Berlin, specifically to be granted on Thursday or Friday. Those dates would be March 3rd and March 4th. Also this week, as we've talked about previously, that water court case, that is also scheduled to be heard on Friday, March 4th. So again, that doesn't affect the final permit, as we've talked about, but it is still important to pay attention to because if the groups bringing that case were to win, then that would put Tesla's water supply permit at risk. I think the timing here is interesting though, and probably favors Tesla because it's kind of hard to imagine that the German government would be all excited about announcing this final approval, and then all of a sudden that same day or the next day, or shortly thereafter, depending on how long a ruling takes. I guess I don't know how long that court case is expected to draw out for, but it's hard to imagine them wanting to give this final approval and then immediately have that sort of detracted from with an overturnment of a permit for water supply. I'm sure they're aware of all the criticism that they've been under for this permitting process, and something like that I think would just heighten it even further. Anyway, getting back to this report, it's not just about the final approval date. They also say that, quote, according to Tagesspiegel information, there is to be a big opening ceremony that is already being prepared. This official event at the plant in Grünheide, for which Elon Musk will fly in, is currently scheduled for the 22nd of March, 2022. However, fine-tuning is still underway. It could also be the 23rd of March. This is at least the date that Brandenburg's police have reportedly been preparing for so far in order to secure a larger event to start operations in Grünheide. They say that Brandenburg's police are preparing for an event with around 500 invited guests, I'd presume predominantly employees in that case, and they say that the event would be including, quote, the handover of the first 30 vehicles produced in Grünheide to customers, end quote. Finally, they say that it is expected that the federal government will be prominently represented. So if this is being coordinated, it kind of explains why some of these leaks are coming out and this is being reported on. And they do seem to be using fairly confident language in this report. So hopefully some really good news here. I mean, we'll definitely knock on wood a little bit as we move through some of these suggested dates, but hopefully we can shift here from the disappointment of ongoing delays to instead the excitement of watching the production ramp unfold. One element of this that is still a little bit unclear is what exactly happens after Tesla does receive this final approval. We've mentioned comments before by committee members involved in this approval that there would still be a couple of other steps after this final approval before these vehicles can actually be sold. But again, we look to Tobias Lind. I think he's got a good handle on this situation. He notes that this final permit that hopefully is approved Thursday or Friday is indeed a permit for both construction, which Tesla has been doing under temporary approvals, as well as for operation or true production from the plant. And he notes that the committee member never said that there would need to be another approval, simply just pointed out that there would still be some checks that would need to be done after that final approval would be granted, and it would still maybe take a few weeks. So may sound a little bit exasperating, but hopefully as we see that unfold, it is more of a validation of what has been permitted rather than an entirely new permit itself. And hopefully Tesla should be able to work through stuff like that really quickly with how much they've been able to do in this pre-production phase. If the Tagesspiegel report is accurate, that would seem to be the case, with the expectation for 30 deliveries on the 22nd or 23rd. Now, I've talked before about how I kind of expected these to fall into April, just from an accounting perspective, but hopefully this is right. Hopefully that's not the case. Might drag Q1 margins down a little bit from what they would have been, since any of these first production vehicles are going to be at lower margins. But you've got to book the costs anyway, eventually, so it's really just a matter of what Tesla is okay with showing. If we do see these delivered in March, then probably no reason to hold off until April for Texas at that point either. More on Texas in a second, but we do have one other thing from Giga Berlin that has been spotted in drone flyovers. It looks like a double-decker supercharging station. Looks like a bit of a prototype with perhaps an unfinished roof at least, and not entirely clear what this would be for. Maybe for car carriers. Tesla could, charge them while they're on the car carrier. Not sure exactly how advantageous that would be, so maybe this is designed for something like rail transport. Maybe in one of these drone flyover videos, we'll see Tesla testing it out, and that'll give us a better idea, but kind of a curious thing to see. All right, moving on to Giga Texas, just a couple of quick things here. First, we continue to see that parking lot built out and even more Model Ys stacking up there. Jeff Roberts counted them this time, and there were 227 vehicles in the lot. So exciting to see that. Again, Tesla should have enough battery cells for at least 1,000 vehicles and probably even more at this point. So hopefully we'll continue to see this lot filling up. As for Model Y vehicle identification numbers from Austin, remember we had a report of one last week that was a little bit unclear. There have been a couple more of those over the weekend. One of them seemed like they were fake. The other one, this one is coming from Facebook, and it does pass the VIN checker from NHTSA. That's not the be-all end-all of proving it as authentic, but at least a good sign. I'd still temper expectations a little bit until we see a few more reports of this, but obviously we can see the vehicle sitting there. It's getting close. Really should be more of a matter of weeks than months now at this point. All right, another quick update, this time for Canada. We had talked before about how Elon had said that the FSD Beta would hopefully be coming to Canada over this weekend. Looks like the request beta button has now started to roll out with firmware version 2022.4.5.4. This has coincided with Tesla releasing the Canadian safety score page on their website, so it looks like those will be coupled, and presumably the rollout would follow a very similar process to how it has looked in the United States. As far as I know, nobody in Canada outside of Tesla has gotten the beta quite yet. Tesla will probably wait a little bit for those safety scores to get built up, but should be soon. All right, next we've got a couple of updates in regard to Ukraine directly related to Tesla and SpaceX. Starting on the Tesla side, as we have seen Tesla do before during natural disasters, Tesla has decided to open free charging for both Tesla and non-Tesla vehicles in parts of Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary. And Tesla says that we hope this helps give you the peace of mind to get to a safe location. So nice support there from Tesla. And then on the SpaceX side, huge action here. The Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine tweeted at Elon asking for support with Starlink to help ensure strong communication for Ukraine. Elon tweeting that, quote, Starlink service is now active in Ukraine, more terminals en route. Then a follow-up tweet from the Vice Prime Minister today saying Starlink is here. Thanks, Elon Musk, with a photo of a lot of terminals arriving. Stuff like this just seems to instantly diminish any sort of criticism that could be levered against Elon Musk for his actions on Twitter. I mean, you're comparing a few sentences or a couple of memes on social media to actually taking action to change the world, and not only doing that, but also being extremely supportive in times like these very consistently. I think it should go without saying how important communication is during a time of war. There are huge efforts to be able to limit that communication, so for SpaceX to be able to provide some support for Ukraine on that front is extremely valuable for their defense efforts. And for SpaceX, it goes beyond providing Starlink to Ukraine. SpaceX's competency significantly reduces the leverage that Russia would have over their space program, leverage that the director of their space program tried to point out on Twitter last week, and Elon replied to that simply with a logo of SpaceX. So you've got the Starlink contribution, you've got reduced dependency on Russia's space program because of SpaceX. That brings us right back around to where things are heading in terms of energy independence, which is going to be huge for things like this. Who's driving the most change there? Pretty easy to argue, Tesla. Stuff like this is why it's so frustrating when the United States government kind of refuses to acknowledge Elon Musk or acknowledge Tesla. These are extremely important assets for the United States, especially on a worldwide scale. Anyway, getting back to the Starlink piece, I think from a perception standpoint, this has been a huge, huge positive for Elon. There's been a lot of coverage on this, and if you read some Reddit threads and various subreddits that are a little bit more popular, which since Elon has become the richest person in the world have largely flipped to be negative towards him, there are a lot of positive comments in there, even from people that acknowledge that, oh, hey, I didn't really like Elon Musk before, but maybe this is a little bit of an eye-opener. So I don't mean to reduce that action down to, goodwill or brand building or anything like that. Obviously, that's not what it's about, but still important to understand. And I do hope that that plants a seed of positivity around Elon that can persist for some more time. Certainly doesn't hurt the perception of Tesla either. All right, moving on then, a couple other stories to get to. First, an update from Panasonic. They have announced today that they will be establishing a production facility in Western Japan to manufacture 4680 cells. So they've said before that they've been working on test production for 4680s and they'd be announcing a location. Looks like that announcement is what is today. They say that they will continue to progressively develop production capabilities in preparation for the full rollout, and that productivity verification and mass production are set to begin in the fiscal year ending in March 2024. So their fiscal years, as we've talked about with Panasonic before, are shifted a little bit. They end after the end of March. So for them to say set to begin in the fiscal year ending March 2024, that could be any time from the end of our Q1 2023 to Q1 2024. Said another way, they could start mass production in as soon as a year, or I guess technically about 13 months. Another minor piece of Tesla news today is that Bernstein analyst Tony Sacconaghi has raised his Tesla price target today, 50% increase, but still only to $450 per share from $300 before. We won't spend too much time on that note, but one element that I did find interesting is that they showed a chart of the consensus earnings per share expectations for fiscal year 2022. Their chart goes back to January 1st, 2021, and then they specifically highlight when they last updated their price target in August of last year. The consensus expectation for 2022 around that time was $5.50 per share, something like that. And now they have it at about $9 per share, so up 61% in just 6 months or so. So I'm not sure exactly what point they're trying to make here, but I think they should pay attention to that the analysts have consistently underforecasted what Tesla has been able to achieve, and maybe they should take that into consideration with their own price target. But nevertheless, it was interesting to see that plotted out. All right, last couple of things here. Lucid did report earnings today. So they did announce that for Q4 last year, they delivered 125 cars, but also said that total production so far has exceeded 400 vehicles. That means they've produced around 300 vehicles the last 2 months. That would be a run rate of 1,800 per year. But of course, they are still ramping up. So they did actually update their guidance. Previously, they expected 20,000 vehicles this year to be produced. They have lowered that significantly, with CEO Peter Rawlinson saying, quote, "Looking ahead, we're updating our outlook for 2022 production to a range of 12,000 to 14,000 vehicles. This reflects the extraordinary supply chain and logistics challenges we've encountered and our unrelenting focus on delivering the highest quality products." End quote. Not too surprising to see that reduction, even though it is significant. I think if they can do 12 to 14,000, that would be pretty good progress from where they are at this point, so we'll see. Lastly today, just a quick FYI that I did have the opportunity to go on the Tech Meme Ride Home podcast that was published over the weekend. It's always kind of fun to talk about Tesla with people that don't follow it quite as closely and just kind of see what their thoughts are and share some of my own. So I'll link to that in the description if you want to check that out. My comments start, of course, at around 4 minutes and 20 seconds. So with that, as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And we'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, March 1st episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.